Yeah, welcome back to the channel, and today we focus on plant response to the environment. Now this will be the last topic on this particular this will be the last video rather on this particular topic, right? Now previously we've focused on phototropism, and we've said that phototropism simply refers to the growth movement of a plant with respect or in response to light as the stimulus. But now we're going to focus on geotropism. And geotropism simply refers to the growth movement of a plant in response to the force of gravity. We want to know what effect the force of gravity has on the growth movement of a plant. What effect gravity has on tropism, right? Now, with geotropism, again, our stimulus here is simply going to be the force of gravity. Now, we know gravity to be a force that simply pushes things downward, right? So if the growth movement of a plant is downward, then we're going to say that is positive geotropism. If it is upward, then we will say that is negative geotropism, simply because that particular part of a plant will be growing away or opposite to the force of gravity. Now, let's try to look at the role that auxins have on geotropism. Specifically here, we're focusing on shoots, right? We're focusing on shoots, not on roots. Now, it is worth noting, or it is worth remembering, that we said that a high concentration of auxins in shoots promotes growth, but a lower concentration of auxins in shoots will instead inhibit, right? Now, the opposite is true for roots. In roots, we said that a higher concentration of auxins inhibit growth, and then a lower concentration of auxins will promote growth. This is in roots, right? Now, let's focus on the role of auxins on geotropism, right? Now, we know that auxins are going to be produced at the tip of the shoot. That is where auxins are produced when we talk about the shoots, right? But when these auxins are produced at the tip of the shoots, they are going to accumulate on this bottom side. Why do they accumulate on this bottom side? It is simply because of the force of gravity, right? So at the bottom side, there's going to be more auxins than at the top side. Again, this is simply because of gravity. It pulls things downwards. So the same applies to auxins, right? So when we've got a larger or a higher concentration of auxins on this bottom side, then it tells me that cell elongation, which is growth, is going to be faster at the bottom side than it is going to be on the top side, right? So essentially this bottom side will grow faster. Why does it grow faster? Simply because it will have a higher concentration of auxins. But the top side will grow slower. Cell elongation here, it is going to be very slow. Why will it be slow? Simply because it has got a lower concentration of auxins. Now, a part of a plant will always bend towards the side that is growing slowly, right? Now, as a consequence of having a higher concentration of auxins on this bottom side, and therefore a higher rate of cell elongation, which is growth, then this part or this shoot is going to bend upwards. It will bend upwards. It will bend towards the side that is having a least cell elongation, that is growing slowly. So that is why it bends upwards. Now, because a shoot is going to bend upward, we're going to say that shoots are negatively. They are negatively geotropic. They are negatively geotropic. This is simply because the shoots are growing away from the force of gravity which acts or which pulls things downwards, right? So that is all when it comes to auxins and geotropism on shoots, right? Now, over here is simply an explanation or written notes of what I was explaining on the previous slide, right? So this is negative geotropism. Now, let's come to another part of a plant. Here we're focusing on the roots. Now, remember, we said that the role or the function of auxins on shoots and roots is somewhat reversed. One more time. We said that a higher concentration of auxins on shoots promote growth, but a higher concentration of auxins in roots will inhibit growth, right? So here we've got a root that is placed horizontally. Now, with this root being placed horizontally, we know that auxins are going to be produced at the tip of the root. Now, when auxins are going to be produced at the tip of the root, imagine it still being horizontal like this. So if auxins are produced at the tip here, then the auxins are going to accumulate on this bottom side. Again, the reason why they're going to accumulate on this bottom side is simply because of gravity. This tells me that at this lower side, there's going to be a higher concentration of auxins. But at the top side, there's going to be a lower concentration of auxins. But we know that a higher concentration of auxins in roots is going to inhibit growth. Therefore, the lower concentration of auxins on the top side is going to stimulate growth. This tells me that cell elongation on this bottom side is going to be happening at a very slow rate. But cell elongation at the top side is going to be occurring at a fairly fast rate, right? So at the bottom side, it is going to grow very slowly, but at the top side, it is going to grow very fast. But remember, we said that plants are going to bend towards the side that is growing slower. So as a consequence of a higher concentration of auxins on this bottom side, then this root is going to bend downwards because the top side will be growing faster due to a lack of auxins, and then the bottom side will be growing slower due to a higher concentration of auxins. And as a consequence, this root is going to bend downwards simply because this bottom side is going to be growing very slowly. Now, because this root is going to bend downwards towards the force of gravity because it pulls things downwards, then we're going to say that roots are positively. They are positively geotropic. They are positively geotropic. They show positive geotropism. Now, again, these are just notes on what I was describing at the previous slide, right? Let's continue. Now, let's look at geotropism when we're using a clinostat. Now, we've already said that a clinostat is simply a machine that keeps rotating at all times, right? So imagine this to be our clinostat, right? If it is a clinostat, it is going to be rotating at all times. It is going to be rotating, right? Now, we've got a plant here that is going to be placed horizontally like so. But when it is placed horizontally like so, there's going to be this clinostat here. And the function of this clinostat is simply to keep rotating at all times. Now, how is geotropism going to influence the growth of this plant in this case? Well, when we use a clinostat, then the shoot is not going to bend. It is simply going to grow straight that way, right? It is going to grow straight horizontally. The same is also going to apply to the roots. They are going to grow straight horizontally. Why is this the case? This is simply because there's not going to be any one side that we're going to say has got a higher concentration or a lower concentration of auxins. The distribution of auxins when a clinostat is used is going to be even. Now, why is it even? This is simply because there is no side that we're going to define as being definitively the bottom or the top side. Since it is always spinning at all times, then the concentration of auxins is going to be even on all sides. All right. Now, we know that when we've got an even distribution of auxins, then cell elongation is also going to be even. This simply means that the rate of growth is going to be even on all sides. And when we've got an even growing rate on all sides, then the plant will simply grow straight. Now, because it is placed horizontally in this case, then it tells me that this plant will simply grow horizontally straight that way. The same will apply to the roots. Because the distribution of auxins is going to be the same, then the roots are also going to grow horizontally straight. The only reason why we're going to have tropism or the bending of a part of a plant is simply because of an uneven distribution of auxins. But when the distribution of auxins is even, then the rate of growth is also even, which tells me that that particular part of a plant will simply grow straight in whatever direction it was facing initially. Hence, we're saying that it is going to grow horizontally straight and horizontally straight. Right? Again, this is just some notes on what we described in the previous slide. Now, let's look at geotropism in germinating seeds, right? These are seeds that are just starting to grow. Now, let's try to look at this germinating seed here. Now, with this germinating seed, what is interesting is that we've got a part that is called a plumule. A plumule is said to be a young stem, right? We also have a part that is called a radicle. A radicle is a young root, right? Now, when this seed starts to germinate, auxins are still going to be produced at the tips, right? Now, because this plant or this germinating seed has got its plumule and its radicle growing horizontally like so, it tells me that there's a definitive bottom side and also a top side, right? So when auxins are produced at these tips, they are going to accumulate at the bottom, right? So at the bottom of the radicle and also at the bottom of the plumule, there's going to be a higher concentration of auxins. But since the plumule is simply represent a young stem or a young shoot, we know that a higher concentration of auxins in this plumule will promote or will stimulate growth, right? So the bottom side here in the plumule is going to grow at a faster rate than the top side, simply because the top side will have a lower concentration of auxins, right? So if this one is growing faster and the top side is growing slower, then this plumule is going to bend upward, simply because we know that our plant or our shoot will simply bend towards the side that is growing what? Slower, right? Because it is going to bend downward. It is going to bend upwards rather. We know that this plumule is going to be negatively geotropic because it is growing away from the force of gravity, which simply pushes things down. But the opposite is true for the radicle, right? Since the radicle is a young root, then the concentration of auxins is going to be higher at the bottom. Again, this is simply because of gravity. But at the top side, there's going to be a very low concentration of auxins, right? And we also know that a higher concentration of auxins in roots or in the radicle in this case is going to inhibit growth. So the side that has got more auxins in this root is going to grow slower, and the side with fewer auxins is going to grow faster. This is the case in roots, right? So because this side grows slower and this side grows faster, then this radicle is simply going to bend downwards. Again, a part of a plant will simply bend towards the side that is growing slower, right? Now, because the radicle is going to bend downward, it tells me that the radicle or the young root is positively geotropic simply because it bends towards the source of gravity, which is exactly what is represented by this diagram of this very same germinating seed after a week. So the plumule has bent upwards and the radicle has bent downwards. Again, this is simply because of an uneven distribution of auxins, right? Now, let's look at the use of auxins as herbicides. Now, herbicides are simply chemicals that are used to kill weeds. These are plants that are not necessarily needed, right? So we call them herbicides. These are chemicals that are used to kill those plants, right? Now, it is said that in the production of some herbicides have got a very high concentration of auxins, right? So these are herbicides. These are chemicals that are used to kill plants. They are used to kill weeds. But it is said that these herbicides, they've got a very high concentration of auxins, right? So how is it that a chemical that has got a high concentration of auxin is going to affect or kill a weed? How is it going to happen? Now, it is said that we're going to simply spray this herbicide on the weeds, right? But as a consequence of spraying this herbicide on the weeds, then the weeds are going to grow extremely fast. They're going to grow very fast. Now, this makes sense if we consider the fact that we know that a high concentration of auxins in shoots will promote cell elongation. It will promote growth. So if we're going to spray more auxins on a particular plant, then it is simply going to promote cell elongation. Then that particular plant is going to grow extremely fast. So this statement makes sense, right? But Because the plant grows extremely fast, that is going to represent a problem. Why is it going to represent a problem? Because the amount of water as well as the nutrients that the plant is going to be able to absorb will be insufficient in order to sustain that particular plant, right? So there's going to be a shortage in terms of water and nutrients in order for that particular plant to continue to live. This is simply because it has grown extremely fast due to the addition of these auxins as herbicides, right? So the uptake of water as well as the nutrients is going to be insufficient. Now, because it is going to be insufficient, the plant is consequently going to become weak. Not only weak, but it will eventually die, right? So by using auxins, we are able to kill these weeds because we cause them to grow extremely fast. But when they grow extremely fast, then the intake of water as well as the nutrients is going to be insufficient. Because it is now insufficient, the plant will become weak and it will consequently die. Right. So this is when we've sprayed these herbicides on the shoot, on the leaves, on the stems. But what if we spray these herbicides on the roots? What will happen? Well, since these herbicides are said to contain auxins, we know that a higher concentration of auxins in roots will simply inhibit growth. So if we are to spray these herbicides on the roots, then the growth of the roots is going to be inhibited, right? Hence we say that the spraying of these herbicides will simply inhibit root growth. By inhibiting root growth, then the absorption of nutrients as well as the water is also going to be affected, right? It is going to be insufficient, and as a consequence, the weeds are simply going to die, right? So this is how auxins are used as herbicides. When you spray them on the shoots grow extremely fast. When they grow extremely fast, the uptake of water as well as the nutrients is going to become insufficient, and therefore the plant is going to become weak and die. What if we spray these herbicides on the roots? Well, the same is also going to happen. This simply because the roots are going to grow extremely slowly, and as a consequence, there's not going to be enough water and nutrients that are going to be absorbed by the plant. Right, let's come to our last part, which is plant defense mechanisms. Here we're simply looking at how plants are able to defend themselves, right? How they ensure that you are not going to eat them or want to come into close contact with them, right? Now, it is said that plants are going to protect themselves in two ways. One, they're going to protect themselves through the use of thorns, right? Thorns are simply going to pierce your skin. They're going to cause you pain. So you do not want to deal with plants that have got thorns in them. And then we also have chemicals. These chemicals, they are going to damage your skin. They're going to be distasteful. They will not taste really good. So you're not going to want to deal with a plant that has got chemicals because they do not taste good, or they are going to harm you in some way, right? So because plants have got thorns and some have got chemicals, these are mechanisms that are going to serve as a deterrence. They are going to cause you to not want to deal with or come into close contact with these plants, and therefore by so doing, these plants have been able to protect themselves from you as a person and also from other herbivores, right? So these are plant defense mechanisms. Now, if you like what I've had to say, please consider subscribing to the channel and maybe liking the video. Until next time, bye-bye.